Hello everyone, welcome back to the Christ MotoGP Podcast. It's episode 147, and I just wanted to say that because if you're a snooker fan, you might find it funny. You'll only understand what I mean if you watch snooker, but anyway, we're here to talk about the Sepang Test. It is finished, and there's plenty to divulge from the 3 days that we've seen in Malaysia. First of all, Lewis Duncan's here with me. Lewis, MotoGP's back, and it seems a bit different this year. Ducati are still very fast, but we don't know what the 25 and the 24 difference really is, because as you can tell from the time screens and the results, GP24 still seems to be the bike that everyone has to beat.
Yeah, well, first of all, Jordan, I don't watch snooker, so I didn't get that reference. You could probably tell by my hoodie that's not my bag, but I'm sure there's. I'm not really a sports guy, to be fair. I like racing and I like hockey, and that's about it. People come out and they make football references, and I'm just like, I don't. Right over my head. Yeah, Ducati. Yeah, it's a funny one because we've seen obviously the GP24 with Alex Marquez has topped the test. We saw the GP24 with Franco Morbidelli on day 2 top the test outright. So we know the GP24 package is sorted. You know, it's the package that won 19 of 20 Grand Prix last year. The most dominant bike in MotoGP history. Of course, it was going to hit the ground running, especially if you're those guys like Alex Marquez, for example, who were on that GP23 last year, and it was a step down for them. They really, really struggled with it. This bike is a bike that allows them to use the riding style a bit more. Obviously, Morbidelli's a bit more dialed in with the bike because he had a whole year on it. So we see this in testing. I think we saw it in Barcelona as well. Alex Marquez jumped on the GP24 fastest straight away. The Factory Boys has been an interesting one. They've not exactly been slow, but we don't really fully know in terms of what package they've been using correlates to the times we've seen on the timesheets. You know, they've not been slow. Bagnaia was second overall. He was only 7,000th slower than Alex Marquez outright in the test. Marc Marquez was 5th. Mark did quite an eye-catching sprint simulation, but it was, you know, a few hundredths slower than Alex Marquez's sprint simulation. You know, when the media spoke to the riders, they didn't say what version of Ducati they were running. There's this real push. It's a really busy test for the Factory Boys trying to figure out what engine, because of course there's a 2-year engine freeze comes into effect as of the 28th of or the 27th of February, technically, ahead of the new season. They know they need to get it right because Ducati have gotten it wrong before. We remember back to 2022.
Yep.
On the eve of the season, Bagnaia and Miller went for a hybrid 2021 version because his full 2022 didn't work. Martin and Zarco at Pramac were forced to go into 2022, and they had quite difficult seasons as a result. I don't think we're in that kind of a situation, but as both Marquez and Marc Marquez, that is, we're talking about a lot of Marquez's. Vancouver Canucks fans, if you listen, will know there's now 3 Petersons on the team, so this is it's really not been a great week for me as for the sports I pay attention to. Marc Marquez has said, you know, we have to be super sure about this engine because the GP24 was such a strong base. So yeah, I think it sounds like they're really not quite sure that if they went for the GP24, that's not really a bad option. But we also don't really know what other kind of chassis parts and stuff like that they're testing because they just won't tell us.
Exactly. I think you can look at it from both sides. It's like, well, they were so focused on engine. McKinley Purwood done some testing at the shakedown with new parts, new fairings and stuff, and they're already on that bike already in full Ducati coloured. So, like, they must be pretty sure about the aero and everything. As you said, the engine is, like, the key. And the comment about Marquez, he said, you know, got a good base. You know, the GP24 won 19 out of 20 Grand Prix. I'm like, do you have to really change it? I think they're leaning more towards when they go to Buriram, if they know the 24 is the way they want to go, fine, because personally, I can't see another manufacturer jumping Ducati in terms of engine. I mean, yes, KTM might be faster, but the talk about 25 engine is that it's a little bit smoother, but it lacks in certain areas. But the 24 does everything a little bit better. So that screams to me they're just waiting to get to Buriram. They want to try the same maybe program they done for day 2 and 3, because remember there's one less day in Thailand, and if they feel like the 24 is the answer, I think that'll be it. Do you think that's because you can't really? Marquez said to Dorna on Video Pass, he said that you can't really get sort of complacent with perfection. Like, you can't always just make another step. If you just can tweak little bits here, or even if you can't, what you have is already one of the greatest engines and bikes ever in MotoGP. So I think they're going to go down that route of the 24. What do you think?
I think that there'll be two things they'll be looking out for at the Buriram test. You know, the Sepang's a great test circuit, but by the time the riders get to the actual official test, there's been 3 days of shakedown, so there's already a reasonable amount of rubber on track if it hasn't rained. By the third day, if it hasn't rained, you've just got you've got the grippiest track there has ever been. Yeah. As Marc Marquez said today, it was unreal, was the word he used to describe the track conditions. Buriram will be a different situation altogether, and there'll be two things I think that Ducati will be looking for with this GP25 engine. Does it brake as well into those hard braking zones, and is it as smooth off the corners? Top speed is not really a problem. Like you say, the KTM is fast, but the KTM doesn't have a smooth engine.
Exactly.
You know, it's got a bloody fast one, but this is what Pedro Acosta was saying this week, that they're really looking to try and calm the bike down a bit, and it sounds like they're making progress, but not quite. Mm-hmm. I think Ducati, that's what they'll be looking for, and if they can't quite get it only has to be a little bit better than the GP24. They're not looking for 5-6 tenths of lap time. Obviously, that'd be great if they could find it.
If they did, I mean, there's no point of watching.
But they're just looking that it is at least 1-2 tenth and a half better than the GP24. If that's what they can get, you know, that's it. All of it as well will come down to feeling. If the riders feel that it's better, that's kind of the crucial thing. So I think that's really what we'll see is does it brake as well? Does it accelerate as well? Because the engine braking thing was obviously a real problem with the 23. You know,
that's right.
Pecco spoke about this before. He said that the GP22 was like the perfect bike, and then they tried to improve on that, and they introduced an engine that was a heck of a lot more aggressive, and it showed over the last couple of years of all those riders that was on it. So this is where they're going. The fact they've only got 2 days as well is quite, you know, cutting it close to the bone. But as Marquez said, they're in a great position because they're coming from an engine that is a fantastic base. Yes, others are making steps, but you know, we've seen this before with Ducati. This first few races of the season, maybe people are a bit closer to them, while they just kind of get everything up to working the way it needs to be, and then there's this step, and it's very much following that pattern right now.
Yeah, I said to our colleague Alex Whitworth, who works with us, and I said, it reminds me a little bit this test of F1 with Mercedes when they were properly like unbeatable Mercedes. You would have thought sometimes in a test you've seen Ferrari or Red Bull get close and you're thinking, hang on here, are they struggling? And then you get to the last day of a official test and Mercedes just blow everyone out the water. They just show why they were fast. I kind of see it with Ducati, and like people are like, I don't know, are people closing in? You look at the top 5 of these results. GP24 top. We don't know what Bagnaia was on in the second place, but it's a Ducati. Fabio Quartararo's third. Franco Morbidelli's fourth on the GP24, and Marc Marquez is fifth. I mean, having 4 of the top 5 is not too bad, is it? When you consider, you know, GP24 is working in great condition. Not surprised there. But if the GP25 is second and fifth, and it's Bagnaia's a tenth and a half off his all-time lap record on whatever bike he done today, I think that's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's inevitably going to be this sort of closing up to Ducati over the next couple of years. We are coming to the end of this rules cycle now. So, and as Gigi Dall'Igna told us in Barcelona last November, they are aiming to have the 2027 engine at the very least on track at some point this year and some sort of private test. So clearly there's already been this shift within Ducati with one eye on 2027 that maybe some of the other manufacturers haven't done yet or haven't been able to do yet because they are still trying to bridge this quite big gap. So we will, we are going to see this gap shrink, but because the others have got much more margin to improve than Ducati has.
Exactly.
So, we look at this, and it's exciting for us, but I wouldn't look at it as sort of Ducati kind of being pegged back or anything like you say, Jordan. They're still very much up there. The GP24 will probably be a very, very competitive bike to begin the season with. The GP24 engine probably is, at the moment, you would have to say is certainly a really, really good option for the factory bike. But Buriram will kind of be a really important one there. Yeah. I don't think Ducati are kind of hitting the panic button. The fact that they maybe the fact they're in this position and they don't quite know the direction to go in is a luxury, because they can have 2 more days. Everyone else, for the most part, apart from Honda and Yamaha, obviously, because they're concession teams, will pretty much have to have settled on the engine today. They don't have enough time to kind of to drag that process out, I don't think. And obviously, when it comes to engines, Ducati have been the king of engines for 20 years in MotoGP. Let's be honest here. It's an area that, okay, you can maybe get more top speed in them, but you're not really going to beat them when it comes to the overall characteristic of an engine. So, yeah, Ducati are in quite a luxurious position, and we haven't seen them beat the lap records yet, which we did last winter. Nobody has, to be fair, which is
that's a telling sign, I think. Actually.
Interesting, yeah. But obviously, we've seen quite a lot of movements elsewhere, kind of in that pecking order. But fundamentally, Ducati comes away with it with the best overall time, in terms of lap time, the best sort of race average in terms. We only kind of saw sprint simulations really. Ducati were 1 and 2 in that.
Yep.
And by quite a margin as well. If you look at Alex Marquez's sprint simulation over 10 laps, his average worked out at 1:57.901.
Yep.
And that's about 0.6 quicker, just about, than Jorge Martin's average from the sprint race.
Yeah, I know.
We say last year. It wasn't last year. It was 4 months ago, pretty much. So in 4 months, that's Ducati have been able to find success. Obviously, track conditions have played a part, but that's kind of that's where they're still at. So, yeah, I think, well, maybe not out and out, then maybe not as kind of dominant, and maybe there's still this kind of thing of we don't know what engine to go with. Ducati are still very much in a very, very good position, and yeah, there might be 2 less bikes on the grid, and obviously we haven't been able to see what Fabio Di Giannantonio could do on the GP25 because he's been injured. We are kind of looking at going into Buriram with, the factory duo up there. Alex Marquez will be up there. Fermin Aldeguer has been really impressive over his tests. He might well spring a surprise. So, because we always see as well, obviously that first race when the test has been before, everything's a bit closer. So those guys that are maybe rookies, we saw Pedro Costa last year.
Yeah.
Can kind of hit the ground running. So, yeah, I think Ducati are very much still your manufacturer to beat, but there has been a noticeable shift of what's happened behind them.
There has been, and we'll come on to them in a second. I just want to talk about the sprint simulation. So, I maybe assume that people are listening to this, you've been on social media and you've seen certain times posted. Just to break it down, Alex Marquez fastest, as you said, Lewis, at 57.901 average lap, so 157.9. Marquez is literally his brother. He's literally right behind him. He's at 157.926. Fabio Quartararo was based off 6 laps. I've got down here, so it's a 58 flat, so 58.031. And Pecco Bagnaia is there at 158.242 over his 10 laps. And then you've got Fermin Aldeguer over 8 laps. He's at 58.50 or 580. And Pedro Acosta I wrote down just as a reference for where another manufacturer is. He's at 58.596. I think Ducati are comfortable there. That's, look at that, 0.6 a lap nearly that Alex Marquez has over Pedro Acosta.
Yeah.
It's pretty frightening, to be honest, when you look at it. And Alex Marquez, I wrote down here, he's P1 in Barcelona, P3 on day 1 of the Sepang Test, P3 on day 2, and P1 again at the end of the Sepang Test. That's really good, isn't it, for a satellite team? And as you say, Fermin Aldeguer as well, really strong. Yes, he had shakedown days, but you look at that GP24 in that Gresini setup, that's pretty much way better than they had last year, isn't it?
I think you can kind of play devil's advocate two ways with the Grassini thing. First of all, with Alex Marquez, he's generally always been quite strong at Sepang. You remember 2022, he was on pole there. He was fighting for the podium. It's always been generally quite a good place for him. But and also last year as well was kind of one of these races he was quite strong at. So obviously that's a factor. The GP24, they don't have to do any development on that bike. It is the full Barcelona spec end of season, the one that Jorge Martin won the championship on. That's that bike, so that's dialed in for a rookie as well, like Fermin Aldeguer. That's great because obviously it cuts away so much of the development time. You compare that to someone like Ayagura, for example, who does have to develop 2025.
Essentially on the same program as Bezzecchi and Martin, if Martin was there.
So yeah, exactly. So you've that, and I guess Chantra to a lesser extent. I can't imagine Honda putting too much development effort on him, really, if you look at the kind of lap times. But so there's that. But on the flip side of that, one thing that is often a problem for rookies is when there's a lot of grip on track, is how do you exploit that? Because obviously there is so much more performance there, and we've seen from Fermin Aldeguer putting a fantastic qualifying sim on the second day.
He did, yeah.
And he put in a great race run, as you said. I mean, he was kind of fifth on the sort of averages that we have of kind of data, really. So the fact he was able then to kind of use all that grip and really get a good amount out of it, and there's clearly still margin to improve, that's impressive. Likewise from Alex Marquez, clearly, when there's ample grip there and there's a margin to kind of explore, he's able to do that straight away. So, I think and he spoke about this last year when he said, looking ahead to 2025, he was like, I know that this bike is going to be super sorted. So in those early rounds, that's when I have to take advantage of that. That's when I've got to take advantage of the fact that the factory boys will still be developing. That's when I've got to take advantage of all these things.
Yeah.
And I think from Ducati's point of view as well, having Alex Marquez up there, having a competitive GP24, especially in this preseason right now, is helpful in terms of they can look at the data comparing the GP25 engine and the GP24 and go, okay, here's where it's clearly better, worse. They can, run that against the rider feelings, and they can go, okay, well, if it's clearly better here and I'm struggling here, then, I think that's going to help them quite a lot. Whereas if you think last year, the GP23 was a difficult bike for them, all the GP23 riders. Yeah, and again, Ducati kind of had a bit of a truncated one because obviously Franco Morbidelli wasn't there to help with GP24 development. So,
correct, yeah.
It's I think Grassini can be really, really happy with that, and I think we'll just see that continue. And don't rule them out for fighting for the wins in those first few races. Those are good tracks for them. Remember Alex Marquez at Argentina as well, for example, a couple of years ago. In those wet conditions. We always get these funny conditions in these first few races. Thailand's kind of a completely unknown to us as a first race as well. We've not raced at this time of year in Thailand before.
So you just don't know, do you? It could rain, it could be so hot. You don't know. That's the thing. And what I'd say, last year was kind of the outlier in the year-old Ducati trend for recent years. 2022, Enea Bastianini on the GP21, he was the guy who took advantage of the mistakes from the factory boys. Yeah. 2023, Marco Bezzecchi was the guy on the GP22. Obviously, last year was a bit different because new rear tyre. GP23 wasn't up to latest spec, as we could say, but this year it's kind of reverted back, and I think that Alex Marquez has got to play the role like those riders I've mentioned of striking early and maybe not getting in, this is wild saying this, not getting into a title fight, but just trying to pick up podiums, race wins here, because he is strong around these opening tracks, and I think that if there's someone who could take advantage, he has the experience now. Let's not forget, he is a two-time world champion. Alex Marquez could really just annoy them, get involved. And I imagine him and Marco will be joking about, oh, look at this, the simulations of sprints. I imagine Alex will be enjoying that he's a little bit quicker than his brother. So I think Ducati have played it very well at the minute. Let's see what happens in a few days' time at Buriram. We'll look at Yamaha now, because this is the next thing. Fabio Quartararo's 8 attempts year on year, he's improved. That's pretty big in terms of a jump, isn't it, for a manufacturer. Like the other Yamahas were quick as well, but Quartararo's been the eye catcher, hasn't he, for the past few days?
Yeah, well, you think kind of between sort of 20 years, remember Fabio a few years ago, from 2019 to sort of 22, 23, he was always going, we've made no difference, we made no jump in lap time. And now all of a sudden from, in the space of a few months, it's 8/10, it's almost a second. That's an insane amount of time to be finding.
Yeah.
Regardless of track conditions and all that type of thing. And yes, people point out, well, Yamaha were on track for the shakedown, blah, 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 blah. Fabio was asked about this actually a couple of days ago, and he said, well, actually, I don't really think it made a difference because my lap time in the shakedown already was a 1:57.3 or 4 or something like that. It was a low, it was a good lap time for yesterday. When you compare yesterday was... the best time was a 57.2, so kind of Fabio was already in the ballpark, fresh out the gate in the shakedown, to then produce a 1:56.7, which is the fastest ever Yamaha lap around here. There are clear signs of progress, and it's been like that from the off. All Yamaha riders have sounded happy with it. They've all looked good for most of the tests. There's been at least 3 M1s in the top 10. There has very clearly been a shift here. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves too much because obviously we're missing Jorge Martin, and that's really a big piece of this puzzle missing. Is where does a world champion and Aprilia fit into this equation? But Bagnaia said it in the off season. Massimo Rivola said it in the off season. Watch out for Fabio Quartararo. They know he's a good rider, but they have also clearly seen there has been this. Towards the end of last year, there's been this shift from Yamaha.
Definitely.
We've spoke about it a lot in the podcast, the behind-the-scenes changes. Max Bartolini coming in as technical director has really energised things, and he's clearly bringing a lot of good stuff to that bike. The problems are still there. They haven't quite touched on the rear grip thing yet, but from what Fabio's been saying, and Jack Miller as well, is that there's a lot of good grip when you've kind of those faster corners. Those slower low-gear acceleration still a bit of a problem, but... they can fix that. They can, the top speed's not so bad. It's not the best, but it's not totally gutless either. It's not like where Honda is, which is still kind of bottom of the speed trap. There's a lot to be excited about here from Yamaha, and Pecco again kind of alluded to it in his debrief on Friday. He said, look, I think the order behind us is going to change, and I think it's going to close up a bit. And I think that's a kind of not so subtle nod of look where Yamaha is, specifically look where Fabio Quartararo is on a Yamaha. So it's exciting. Like it genuinely, it's been the past few years we've got to the pre-season and Honda and Yamaha, and it's been rubbish. And basically, all you're hearing from all the riders is nothing's working. This isn't good enough. We're not making a step, etc., etc., etc. Now all of a sudden, for both camps, both Honda and Yamaha, it's very much a case of there's clear signs of progress for Yamaha more so.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot to be said there for the fact that obviously Yamaha has kind of done all this work and put all these parts on the bike without having a satellite team last year. All the developments we've seen are all stuff that has basically been developed all year and then evaluated in the Barcelona test and then kind of updated. But this is... So that you've got to give them credit for that. I genuinely think you have to give them credit for the fact that they've for so long been such an undermanned kind of outfit, and this is the progress they've made with that, and now they've got a satellite team. It just takes that to the next level.
It does, yeah. And before I forget, let's hear from Pete McLaren. He's going to drop in a little voice note here about his thoughts on the test. He's been there, I don't know how long in Malaysia now. He's been there for like a week, I think. So he's let's hear from Pete what he thinks of the last few days that we've seen on track.
Hi guys, Friday evening here in Malaysia. We've just had day 3 of the official test, so 6 days of testing, 8 days at Sepang in a row. So plenty of track time, good weather, not too much rain. So obviously the official test began with a bang, didn't it, with the accidents and the injuries for Martin, Fernandez and Digi Antonio on day 1. Sort of settled down on days 2 and 3. Quartararo, using that shakedown knowledge, was fastest on day 1 of the official test. Then the Ducatis took over on days 2 and 3 at the top, but it was the GP24s, wasn't it, that were there with Morbidelli on day 2, Alex Marquez on day 3. Marquez sort of completed a double in a way on the last day by also being the fastest with his sprint runs. So, looking really impressive on a bike that, is obviously a proven package, having won last year's championship. So, he got the better of Mark just on his sprint run, which he was quite pleased about. Bagnaia was a few tenths behind, but wanted to sort of stress that it was far from the optimum package that he chose for the sprint simulation. They were working on different things to mark, gathering data for the engineers. It seems like they're cagey exactly about what they're testing at Ducati with the 25 as how much of the bike is a 24, how much is a 25, but certainly they're still sort of working on the engine. We heard earlier in the test that they need to be sure about it because it's going to be frozen. Braking's a bit of a concern, so they're trying to improve the braking. They've also got chassis to try, aero, and all these other things, but the 24 is clearly a very fast bike. Of the others, to be honest, Yamaha probably were the second best manufacturer. We didn't see so many longer runs from them, but Quartararo was fast all the way through the test, and the other three bikes were also up there, so they did pretty well. Let's see what happens at Burrum. Pedro Costa, top KTM, in 6th. Zarco Mir, 7th, 8th for Honda. And Bezzecchi 9th for Aprilia without Martin there. So all the factories there in the top 10. But let's see what happens at Burrum. Different track, same climate, but a very different track and different tyres, of course, with the sort of the heat-resistant rubber that they use there. So they've got a few more days, and then they'll be back on track with plenty of parts to work through, especially if... especially for the factory teams. For the guys like, obviously, the GP24s, the guys with bikes that are proven, they don't have new parts to worry about. They'll just want to see, if you're Alex Marquez, you're Fermin Aldeguer, Franco Morbidelli, if they can get the same sort of speed they've shown here in Sepang. And the question mark, I suppose, really is whether those guys that had the shakedown, how much of an advantage did that give them? And all of that will be revealed in a few days at Burrum.
Then we'll just have a look at Honda. I think there's plenty of optimism there. Joan Mir especially seems like a changed rider almost, and I know it's only testing, but Lewis, that's really, really encouraging to see Mir put in his best lap times of Sepang and to be inside the top 10 each day. And Johan Zarco's in there as well. That's really good for the concession teams, isn't it, and brands, that these changes are actually working, and the personnel changes, like you said, with Yamaha, Honda have done that too, and it's starting to reflect on track, which is really positive.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the Honda thing, again, kind of like Yamaha, you've got to give Honda credit because a lot of what you're seeing on track right now was all development sort of pre-Romano Albesiano, so you can't really attribute what we've seen on track so far to him coming in. He'll have had a little bit of influence, maybe, certainly in the test program and that type of stuff, but and he'll have his own ideas about how to maybe get something to work, that type of thing. But fundamentally, that's come fully from HRC in Japan over the winter, and they've done a great job. There's still problems there. They need more engine power, as Joan Mir said. They've gained about 1 kilometre an hour on the straight with a new one, but that also hasn't touched on the rear grip problems that they have. The fact that the bike can turn better, though, does help because he can brake later. He can turn more how he likes, and therefore, so he can carry a bit more speed. So there's not that kind of, having to really rely on traction from slower corners. So through faster stuff, it's a bit better. So there are clear signs of progress. I don't think Honda are going to be, quite at the level of Yamaha when we start the season, but, Mir for the whole time, for the first time in I don't know how long, for 3 consecutive days has been the most positive we've heard Joan Mir probably ever at Honda. Genuinely happy all the time. He knows there's problems, but he's very happy with everything that's been done. Kind of a little bit sort of role reversal, because Luca Marini was not super happy with where things were at the end of the test. I think he said he was sort of felt the gap to the front was kind of the same as it had been. I think what we will start to see this year is with this bike improving, we will maybe see a bit more of a reshuffle of the pecking order within Honda, because with all due respect, I don't really believe Luca Marini is factory rider level. Joan Mir is a world champion. Johan Zarco has proven that he can be a factory rider. He can lead development, and he can obviously win races as well in MotoGP. And was a very, very good rider for Honda last year, and what was a really horrible year for them. So I think maybe some of Marini's comments relative to Mears is what is maybe a little bit of a sign of that. Is what we're seeing is that they've made updates that kind of allow a rider of Mears' caliber to ride a bit better, a bit more to his level. Zarco as well, and that's just what we're seeing. Is we're just seeing, and that's not based on any. It's not me being snidey or anything towards Marini. Look at last year, yeah, it was first team to bike, but it took until Germany for him to score a point, and even then, that came as a result of a penalty. So, yeah, and you look at his kind of previous kind of experience on the Ducati relative to the other satellite Ducati riders around him. Bez being a great example. Same bike, same team. Didn't really do anything with it. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to see with Honda, is just this role reversal of talent, and that's not a bad thing. I think Honda kind of do, if they have a bike that suits Mir, they do need to lean on Mir a bit more. He is a world champion. He has a lot more relevant experience, from the Suzuki, which can help Honda. So, yeah, positive though. I mean, if you look at the best time is almost 7/10 quicker than what they managed last year in qualifying, which is, again, grip. We keep throwing this caveat in, so just always bear that in mind.
Yep.
But, that's still impressive, because if you were slower than that with all that grip, then that's a big problem. So, but we don't really know where they kind of shook out in terms of sprint simulations, because they didn't. Looking at a 10-lap run that Mir did on Friday, it was all in the mid to high 159s, which is kind of bang on the best Grand Prix pace from last year. It was about similar to what HRC managed in the sprint last year, so it's kind of hard to tell if they were doing a sprint simulation, if they were doing a long-run sim on high fuel, used tyres or whatever, so we're still to kind of see that. But overall, I think Honda can leave this test pretty happy with where they are. There's still clearly a lot of work to do, but you have to think that if phase one of this was get a good bike on the grid for the start of the season and then let Albessiano take over. So they've made a step from last year, and I think that's really, really positive, and I think they can be really happy with that.
Yeah, they can. I'm going to leave KTM. Me and Pete will cover that on our next podcast on Monday. Lewis is off, and me and Pete will take a look maybe more at the technical stuff that we kind of spotted and the changes. KTM are kind of leading that way. But just to give a brief breakdown on day 3, Brad Binder was 13th, Pedro Acosta was 6th, Marc Vinales 16th, and Ed Bastianini 18th. We'll talk more about that on Monday. Certain things with KTM, you can read into certain comments from riders. I don't know where they really are, to be honest. I think they're kind of in the middle, but I would expect them to be a bit stronger as they get to Berrier on a track that's kind of been good for them in the past. So, yeah, we'll cover that more on Monday. Just the injured riders now, Lewis. Just day 1, we'll kind of reflect on that. I mean, I woke up, not my own choice, I got woke up by my daughter, and I just thought, well, I'll start and have a look a wee bit earlier than usual for the test, and I looked and Jorge Martin was on his way to hospital, and I couldn't believe it, to be honest. And then the crash video came out, and you see the incident that he had, and you're thinking, my God, like, he's so unlucky there. And then Raul Fernandez, he breaks a bone in his hand, and Fabio Di Giannantonio, at the end of the day, he's pulling a wheelie, and just on the angle, the way the front lands, it's like 3 degrees out, I think, or whatever, touches the brake and it goes down, and he breaks his collarbone. Like 3 injuries in day 1. Like, can you ever remember a day like it at a test, especially?
No, I mean, the most mad day of testing I can remember for a long time was maybe that first test in Michelin tyres at Sepang when Loris Baz's tyre exploded. Yeah. But other than that, yeah, it's hard to imagine. If I was Ducati, I'd be absolutely furious with Fabio Di Giannantonio right now. Like, to the point, I would be seriously reconsidering my choices of, because it was so stupid. Like, it was a really, people can, unfortunate accident. It wasn't an unfortunate accident. Why are you pulling a wheelie? Like, it's on day 1 of testing when you've not been on the bike for since October. Like, yeah, it's so stupid. And I think it's hurt the factory because they've lost their third and final GP25, and therefore they couldn't. Obviously, they put the Impero back on the bike. They really needed the race rider to be there to help with the GP25 kind of development, and so yeah, and Digi has lost out on time. He will have, if he's fit enough to come back at Buriram, he'll have 2 days of testing before he then has to start a season. A really big season for him. And yeah, if I was VR46, I was Ducati especially, I'd be absolutely furious because he is a factory contracted rider now.
True.
That's, it's the one thing if he's crashed while pushing on a fast lap or whatever. It's another thing to have injured yourself doing something as boneheaded as that. It was like Alex Rins crashing into a truck while using his phone cycling in Barcelona a few years ago. It's these type of things that, really, really do hurt manufacturers, and obviously Digi and Antonio's really hurt himself there, especially with his teammate Morbidelli looking quite fast. I know you're maybe going to have a situation where at the start of the season he's going to be very much further in front. Then you're going to look at that and go, well, was Ducati hasty to remove a factory bike from Morbidelli? Because
exactly.
With another, maybe he could have been. So yeah, I hope Ducati VR46 really wrap Digi his knuckles for that one, because it's stupid, really unforgivable thing to be doing. Fernandez, unfortunate, his crash was a bit of a weird one.
Yeah, have you seen the video of it?
Yeah, strange. Just the front went quite early, and just the angle that he ended up sliding off was not what you typically see at that corner. So he was just sort of that was a case of unfortunate circumstances. Jorge Martin's one, of course, was the big one, and there's been a lot of kind of back and forth with that between Aprilia and Michelin.
Yeah.
Aprilia initially were like there was nothing wrong with the bike, nothing wrong with the rider, tyres were proper temperature. Michelin have now done an investigation and say that, okay, well, the surface temperature of the tyre was fine, the actual internal temperature of the tyre was about 15 degrees off of where it should be. So he was on a medium tyre, which was a harder tyre. A lot of people weren't using that. A lot of the riders said they didn't really like it. It was a bit too hard for the conditions.
Yeah, they were saying it was such, the soft and the medium, there was like a massive gap compared to where it used to be.
Yeah.
And like I had a brief listen to Piero Tarmasso speak, and did he say, I think Bezecchi's rear was the exact same on the inside as well. It was about 15 off.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's happened there, and obviously they're gonna probably do more internal tests and stuff, but like for Martin, he's arrived back to Spain today to get surgery. I can't really believe it, to be honest. Like it's such a shame, isn't it, to not have him there? And he had 2 crashes. I haven't mentioned that. He had 2 high sides really on day one.
One does have to wonder about the sort of the run program there, because most people weren't. Obviously, Michelin said they were kind of saving their soft tires because of an allocation thing. But you would surely, if you're kind of, it's your day 2 on a bike, they would have erred on the side of caution and gone, look, you need to get laps under your belt. We'll use soft tires to get comfortable and see where you're at, and then we'll begin the test program. So, I think Aprilia probably does have to accept a little bit of responsibility for the run program there as being, the result of that. There wouldn't have been as much rubber on the track at that time. It was quite early in the day, hadn't been much running.
It was colder.
It was colder
way unusual for Sepang for it to be cold.
The medium tyre was the same tyre that was brought to the Grand Prix, so they should have probably realised that. Unfortunate, it was a big hit for Martin, and he's probably out for the rest of the pre-season. I can't see him being on the bike for Buriram, so then he comes to Thailand Grand Prix with 90 laps on the bike to begin not only a title defence, but a title defence on a brand new bike that was the 3rd best manufacturer last year and is being spearheaded development-wise by 2 other riders right now who don't know the bike, because obviously Fernandez was the only one that had any experience of the RSGP, and he was out of action as well, so it couldn't have got much worse for Aprilia. And this is quite frustrating for us, trying to analyse where everyone is, because we haven't really seen the true potential of Aprilia. Bez was, the Aprilia was the slowest manufacturer in terms of lap times. Bez was a 1:57.3, so that was about 8/10 off best pace, which, he's learning the bike, got a big test program to do. And, average pace, 1:58.7 on a sprint versus a 1:57.9, so you're about a second off the Ducatis, which I don't think that's where Aprilia is, but they're really, really on the back foot now, and they're going to probably be paying for this test for a good few rounds.
First half of the season, I think. Like I kind of thought about that. Jorge Martin really has to build himself into the year, kind of similar. You can add like Franco Morbidelli last year. He literally turned up. FP1 Qatar was his first real run of the bag, and it takes a while. Obviously, Martin's got a lot of recovery to do, because if he was at the test next week, that would be really surprising. I can't see it. Yeah, it's got to be tough for Martin. I think it was not too bad though. I think Bezzecchi showing the time attack. Yeah, it might be the slowest out of the 5, but I kind of think if Martin was the time attack on it, I know it's really hypothetical thinking. I'm thinking he maybe would be a bit faster, and I just can't. I can't really place it. Like I say, it's frustrating because you want to know the analysis of who's here. Fernandez, like I say, that's the biggest loss because he's the only relevant Aprilia rider who knows from 2 years' experience. He's left with all the Ayagura, his teammate, who's a rookie, who was in 14th, and he done a 157.7, and that was on lap 11 this morning. So, yeah, Aprilia, we can analyse that at some point after. I think after the Buriram test, it'd be good to look at Aprilia. And that's really it. A few days that will live long in the memory for MotoGP for sure, with what happened on day one. It's coming up again, 2 days in Buriram next week. We'll have everything covered there. I imagine, well, I hope it's not as dramatic as it's going to be as it was in Sepang. But yeah, Ducati still on top. Unsure about their engine. Yamaha definitely improving. Honda definitely improving. KTM and Aprilia, it's hard to place them, but let's see what happens next week. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to like, subscribe, all that business. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, give us a 5-star review. Helps out massively. Until next time, we'll see you then.